Yes, please. Oh, it is.
Percentage change. All the rest.
Alrighty. It is 9:02 and I'd like to call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District to order. And we would like to recognize that we are on the traditional territory of the Shtapmian people. Our regional district is committed to positive communications and relationships with our First Nations neighbors. And I would like a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Director the Mayor, seconded by Director Rainbow. No one opposed, motion carried. I know that I asked Director Richmond yesterday, he'd like to defer the regional moment. And I see Director Richmond here on the screen.
I am.
Also zooming in, Eric Anderson, alternate from Squamish. Russell Matt, you can see, good morning, and CAO Dalton. Mike, would you like to address the regional moment or just move on to staff reports?
Yeah, I'm going to, since I'm not there today as well, I'm going to pass it off till next month. So I'll be doing my regional moment next month.
Thank you. CAO verbal update. Go ahead, CAO.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing this morning. Thank you.
Then we can move on to 4.2, the 2023 to 2027 regional budgets. This is our second meeting on this topic, and we'll wait for Director LaFrance to join us. Magic. Morning, Suzanne LaFrance, welcome.
Good morning. So we're talking about the regional budgets. This is the second review of the regional budgets. So the major changes I've highlighted, the ones over $5,000, I highlighted yellow in the budget sheets, and I'll go through those details as well. So I'll just share my screen so we can follow through the notes together. Sorry, I'm just gonna get to the top. All right, so this information you've seen already. This is the new BC Assessments 2023 completed rule. I've also left in the non-market change review. Overall, the non-market change was 1.8% over 2022's assessments. And then the increase to market change was 13.5% over 2022.
You may have to repeat that, Director Rainbow.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, sorry, go ahead, please.
And I added some information on all the inventory changes per participant as well. So for the requisitions for these regional budgets, overall, the consolidated review of the budgets is a 1.2% increase or $34,852. The tax rate does show to be decreasing, and that's due to the assessment changes. So the 1.8 market non-market change and then the 13.5 market change will affect these tax rates. And looking at the separate services, general government shows a small decrease of 44,372, which is a 2% decrease. Regional invasive species is shown flat to last year. There was potential to have the service increased with the service amendment bylaw. However, the original bylaw was worded as such that the allocation was set to a maximum dollar value. So when I tried to amend this bylaw, the province came back and said that I'm not allowed to use the regulation that allows the 5-year 25% increase without inspector approval, because they deem that changing the apportionment part of the bylaw doesn't fall under that regulation. So I do need to get inspector approval for the service amendment bylaw, but it still requires, all the participant consents and approvals still. So I believe we've received a few of those already. And so most likely this will be available in 2024 budget year for an increase if the board desires. So land planning does show a slight increase of $20,414, which is 6%. And the biggest increase is the regional solid waste management, which is 61,427. And that's due to some new programs they've asked for funding for. And I'll get to those later in this presentation. And regional growth strategy shows a reduction of $2,617. And the Sea to Sky trails show flat to last year for requisition. However, I'm also trying to increase this maximum requisition via a service amendment, bylaw amendment. And most likely this also won't be available until 2024, just because the councils have to bring this for approval, and so it'll take more time than I think will be allowed for a March adoption. And so these service amendment bylaws do have to be adopted by March in order to be available for the 2023 budget. Any questions on what I've mentioned so far? Seeing none, I'll just continue.
Suzanne, just for area B, we were really looking forward to that increase for the invasive species group, and the District of Lillooet approved it, and we're all very appreciative of the services that they provide. And I will probably use some funding to make up for that expected increase this year. I'll do a director's report in March at the EAD, and then be requesting PILT at the March board meeting for between $9,000 and $10,000 just for your planning purposes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I can definitely update that for the for March meeting, which will be for adoption.
It's a really critical time. We're doing a lot of really good, important work, and so I want to support them with that. And yeah, thank you. And then it will come in through the tax service next year, optimistically.
Yes. There shouldn't be an issue with approval. All
Thank
right.
you. Oh, I'm sorry, Director Herford.
Yeah, thank you. Just I was curious, I can see the reduction in the regional growth strategy, and that makes sense. We're not doing that big bulk work, but I just wondered about, is the policy to sort of have funds there to do that work when it's time, or do you tax for it when that work's going to occur? Because at some point future that'll come back alive and need to be and require more budget. Just and I'm learning this the process here with this entity. But how do you how do you see that?
Yeah, so we reduced the requisition this year, and when I did the 5-year review, I made sure there was some funding for those 5 years, and that service does have a surplus operating fund. So I'm just gonna to that service. So it basically has a reserve for future expenses, and we'll pull from that to ensure there's enough funding for those contract services for the updates, and I'll just
Yeah,
right here.
just thinking if this ask went the other way
Oh, it's
around,
at the back.
where it was a 44.8% increase, there'd be a lot of questions. So I thought I'd use the decrease to ask the question, so I understood it if there was a spike in the future.
There we go. So right now there is 39,000 in the operational surplus reserve for regional growth strategy. And so when we've requisitioned funds and they haven't been spent, that's where they've been going. And so that's why we've reduced the requisition going forward, as we have such a large surplus right now.
Okay, so we'll still be ready when it is time to pick that work up again and work also. Okay.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Director Pettingill had a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, again, trying to wrap my head around all the pieces of this regional district budgeting. But the service areas where we've asked for a 25% increase, you know, I understand it may not come through this year, but is that because we are anticipating in the near term higher expenses significantly, or is it just sort of as a best practice every 5 years when the opportunity becomes available, we increase the requisition by 25% sort of across the board as matter of standard practice to keep up with inflation kind of thing? I'm just wondering if you can speak to what's driving those, increasing those limits.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's basically a regulation that the Local Government Act has that allows the regional districts to increase their maximum requisition at least 25% over 5 years, because the inspector, I believe, was overwhelmed with requests for increases. So this allows the process to happen without having to constantly go to the province for approval. And it is just a planning practice. And most service establishment bylaws now have both a dollar maximum requisition amount and a rate per thousand based on assessment requisition amount. So naturally, the rate per thousand based on assessment will allow for an increase with assessment increases, but certain services were originally established via bylaw without this rate per thousand of assessment for maximum requisition. So it really limits the availability of increasing that maximum requisition amount if it's just a dollar value that's increasing 25% over 5 years. So most of our service establishment bylaws now have the both options of basically it's the greater of the dollar value maximum or the rate per thousand based on assessment maximum. And it's just a best practice to continue to make sure we have enough funding as the community grows or as the service changes.
Oh, okay, so it's not all of them that will do this every 5 years. It's the ones that were established with this limitation will do those ones every 5 years typically.
Yeah, not every service requires a maximum requisition. So the ones that do have it, they would fall under this regulation, and we're allowed to update every 5 years.
Just to continue the learning on this as well.
Yes, we're not even hearing.
Are we able to, it sounds like this is the mechanism that we're using, but updating the language in those requisitions isn't an option. It feels like a bit of a workaround, and we prefer to have not to have to do this but we have to stick with the language when it was established.
Yeah, the regulation that allows for the maximum requisition to be increased without inspector approval doesn't speak to the apportionment section of the bylaws. So that was the issue with the invasive species amendment. We had to change the apportionment section of the bylaw because it was set to a maximum amount, a dollar amount. And so we couldn't increase the maximum requisition if the apportionment was limited.
Right, so
that was the only issue, and yeah.
Okay, so those updates have generally we've been trying to do those when the opportunity presents itself, if available.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so continuing on, we have some salaries changes. I did update the general government salaries to show more of a transition for the hires. So last month you saw the salaries as all the new hires for the full year being shown in the budget. So I've trimmed that down to show all the new hires starting in April. And that will allow for it, basically reduce the budget, but it is more of a realistic picture and still allow for any new positions to be hired a little bit earlier. I believe we're in the process currently. And I think, so the CPI was 6.6%. And I think that's all for salaries, unless there's any other questions on salaries.
I'm not seeing any.
Great. So the 2022 forecasted amounts are still subject to change. I've obviously gone through them and updated them based on invoices being received. And I'll go into just the general government budget right now. So general government did have a surplus carry forward of 844,575, which is a combination of all these point items below. So increased revenue, mostly interest, also a large increase in the BC Hydro PILT received, time allocation and revenue received for elections work, and the RD basic grant also increased 50,000 this year in 2022. So there's also savings in operating, mostly salaries, but due to unfilled positions. And there's also some savings in capital, which is only 18,000 for our IT server. And the remaining were carry forward projects. So this 216 is the surplus amount for the carry forward projects. And I just matched it up with the actual projects carrying forward. So you'll see, there's some zeros in here because these projects have a revenue source already. So that would be the COVID restart grant. So in 2022, it was budgeted with an expense and a revenue already. So the surplus actually is zero. But it's still carrying forward in 2023 with that same revenue and expense being the revenue from restart grant and the expense of the intranet website cost. Same thing with the cybersecurity audit. It shows as zero just because there's revenue already offsetting this expense. And we've kept the community energy and climate action plan within the projects being budgeted, and also the climate adaptation assessment, but potentially these will just carry forward into 2024. I just didn't want to lose that. Basically, if I don't rebudget those projects, that surplus is then allocated to something else. So it just keeps that carry forward revenue of surplus and that expense for 2023. And if the projects are not completed, it'll just do the same for 2024.
You have a question from Director Demare?
Thank you. Director LaPrance, just on the regional connectivity project, I think that was $40,000. So that 40,000 will carry forward.
Yep.
It was a grant.
And using the reserve fund. So that would be the COVID reserve fund.
Okay,
So,
thank
but
you.
it is carrying forward, yes.
And Director Pettingill and then Director.
Is 844,000 a typical annual carry forward surplus, or can you speak to?
It's quite larger this year for sure, due to all of these items that I listed, like the increased revenue and then the unfilled salary positions.
Okay.
It's an acronym question, and besides being amusing, the BC Rail guilt payments, just what I know, just can you just run me through that mechanism?
Yeah, the BC Rail is the grants in lieu of taxes for the BC Rail properties.
Okay, So,
So they don't get taxed, but they give us a grant in lieu of taxes, and they have their own regulations on how that works. Yeah.
so yeah, I was familiar with the PILT funds, which is the payment in lieu of taxes, but the grant in lieu of tax. Okay.
Yeah, they're interchangeable. You see grants in lieu of taxes in a lot of documents, and you also see the payments in lieu of taxes.
Okay, thank you.
And so these are the updated figures that were highlighted in the general government budget. I did increase the time allocation revenue in both the 2022 results and the 2023 estimated budget. And it was just $5,000 added to the 2023 estimate. And that's just to account for any other departments working with or for general government projects. So there also is, I added in the new local government climate action program grant, and that's 80% recovery of any climate action initiatives that the SLRD partakes in. And so the 2023 budget shows this grant being used for the climate action plan and the adaptation assessment. And we also purchased some software for measurement, which was very little amount, 1.5 thousand.
I'll stop you for a moment, Susanna, correct us?
Sure.
Yeah, I got one more question for you regarding PILT. So that's PC Hydro payment in lieu of taxes. Is that just for the land or is it also for infrastructure?
I'm not aware of that. It's not something that is upfront in my world. I'd have to contact BC Hydro and review.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is, you know, at the Seton Portage where the power generators are, they've put a lot of money into that infrastructure, and then on coming up for us in the Joy Dam, you know, we're looking at $600 million to $1 billion project, which is going to improve their infrastructure. So it'd be interesting to see if it's just for the land or infrastructure also. Because if it is, then we're going to have a big increase.
Well, I believe the amount that is transferred to the regional district is based on assessment changes. I can pull the actual BC Hydro document. They do have a very basic calculation. They don't go into the details of if it's land and improvements, though. I believe it's the full total assessment value that increased.
Well, maybe if that could be an action item to look into it, because I'd be interested to know. Because we're just starting to get into our communications with them on that project. Actually, next week.
We could ask those questions of Hydro too,
Yeah, today.
Yeah.
this afternoon, for example, get that. I've asked a lot of questions about that fund, with some pretty kind of generalized, vague answers. Sorry, I had Director Rainbow.
Well, I just gonna say, when I had the same questions when I started, when it was explained to me, what I can remember from then is that it was based on actual installations like a dam, a power station. It doesn't include the power lines. So
Right.
you could have goodness knows how many power lines running across your area, and it doesn't include that at all. So and I think that was the foundation for the changes we made in allocation of bills. We was looking at where are those places located, and how should the money be shared out.
There is no compensation program related to power lines. I know that for sure. Yeah, it's all to do with dams. And Director Herford?
And sorry, and BC assessment still plays into the PILT fund, or is this an agreement outside of assessment? I just heard assessment there, and I felt like that PILT program was an aside to assessment values. Sorry, again, trying to build my
No, Ms. LaFrance, go ahead.
comprehension.
I think we should maybe park this BC Hydro discussion for, I don't have the answers right now.
Oh, that's a totally fine answer.
Okay. Noted.
So I'll just continue on with the budgets. So the transfers from reserves for the various board resolutions. So these are from the various funding pockets like the Community Works Fund, the Northern and Southern Pilt reserves. These have been updated too based on funding changes or, you know, the spend in 2022 carrying forward into 2023. Trading expenses I've increased due to the new privacy management program requirement. I've increased the office rent and maintenance to allow for more HVAC maintenance at the office. And IT support services, I also increased this as we look to update our IT department potentially with an IT manager, and also we might need more assistance with all of the IT projects coming along in 2023. I've also increased the asset retirement obligations consulting expense 5,000 just to allow for BDO or our external auditors to also review it and make sure we're completing it to their satisfaction. As it's a public sector accounting standard. So the contributions to other governments has also been updated for the Area C transit allocation to the Village of Pemberton. We received the 2022 invoice, and I just estimated that 2023 amount, which will still come from Area C amenities until there is capacity to review the service area. And time allocation expense has been increased to allow for a potential increase in other departments working in general government. I think I've already mentioned that. And also I increased the time allocation expense for the Jack Webster Bridge project because we will have to investigate further how this bridge will be maintained and the ownership of the bridge. There's short-term debt charges. I basically doubled the short-term principal payment in 2023 as the short-term debt rate is increasing exponentially. Right now it's, I think, 5.6 or 5.7. Last year this time it was 1%. So it's a very, basically this doubling up of the principal payment will eventually save us approximately $7,000. And we have the funds available. So that's why I decided to double up the principal payment this year. There is also 60,000 transferred to the operational surplus reserve. So, which is a nice kind of bonus. So now the balance is 449,000, pretty much 450,000 at the end of 2023. And it's still below the recommended guidelines, but because general government operations shift based on projects and plans, I think that 450,000 is plenty, and we would just use that as needed for additional programs and plans that might come up this in 2023 or for future offsets of requisition increases. And for the board's consideration and decision, the health and wellness benefit, currently the policy amount is at 500,000 per full-time equivalent. But in 2021 and 2022, the board had a resolution in place to update this to a doubled benefit of 1,000 per FTE. And so I'm just wanting the board's consideration if they want to continue this doubling of this health and wellness benefit as a permanent option, which would be a policy amendment or potentially another temporary measure for 2023 to increase it as well. There has been some staff feel that the 500 level is not really representative of the increased cost of late. So updating the policy may become an attractive incentive for future hires as well, given the difficulty of acquiring staff.
Go ahead, Director Pettingill.
So is that something that you're looking for direction on today or now, or we'll get us, this is a heads up, a staff recommendation on this is coming forward?
As part of the budget discussion, I was requested to bring this forward to the committee of the whole today. And so it will be just for a decision, so I can update the budget as well, because the budget.
Yeah. This is something that we should be considering here and now.
I'm not sure how to, I'll try and raise my hand here. I'm not.
We're listening, CAO Dalton.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this was, we were asked by the board to bring this item forward for board consideration at this time. It's not a staff recommendation to increase. Suzanne's provided a quick overview of the history both last month and here today, but we were asked to highlight this as an item for board consideration.
What's the cost? What does that cost?
I'm seeing Director Rockville and Director Rainbow. No, that's fine. Go ahead, Maria.
So I think that the $1,000 is good, and I think that we should do it every year moving forward, the $1,000. I just don't think that we should have to turn in or that they should have to turn in receipts or anything like that. Where I stood with that, just based on a privacy issue, if it's for health and wellness.
And Director Rainbow.
No, I would second those comments, but my question was that, what does that cost us? It doesn't seem to me that it's a huge cost. We've got that many staff.
You know how many staff we have. Director LaFrance, would you like to comment on it? I'm sure you know the total cost of this based on what we've paid in the past.
Yeah, so it's obviously divided by each department. In general government, it'll increase the budget $10,000. And planning, it will increase, I believe, 5,000. I have to double check that, sorry.
Let's see, Jack. I'm just waiting for Suzanne, and you're next.
Sorry, just bear with me 1 second here.
I didn't take what Lori said as a motion quite yet, but we'll follow that up. Thank you.
So it will basically double up this line for planning, which would be another 3,250. So it's 10,000 for general government, 3,250 for planning. And utilities and environmental services department also would receive a doubling up, but they charge out all of their costs to their services they work on. So it wouldn't actually increase any requisition for the utilities department, but it would go to, it would be an increase of $4,000.
So rough math is about a $20,000 cost.
Yes.
And we have a question from Director Crompton.
My recollection is that we said that we were content with the CAO managing this line item as we had discussed and agreed at our last meeting.
Can you hear that, CAO Dalton?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And through the chair, that conversation was enclosed at the last meeting.
Oh,
So that's why we were asked just to raise it, as Director LaFrance has done.
thanks for putting that so delicately.
Oops, sorry.
Now we have a question or comment from Director Herford.
Thank you. I'm in favor of this of the $1,000 level, I think that's totally appropriate. I'm thinking about the time, whether it's in perpetuity or if it's just for the temporary. And I was thinking that this would be part of any compensation review or anything for the organization, and maybe it's appropriate to do it in a temporary way and see what the outcome of that process is, and look at it that way. I mean, either way, I think this is a good direction. I just think it could be part of the overall compensation, but of course we can change any policy. So I don't know if there's a pro or con that way. If there's a preference from staff, or if I get some feedback on that general concept.
Mr. Franz, what's the most
Or
efficient for you?
CEO Dalton's gonna say.
Oh, sorry. Yep, Craig, please proceed.
Yeah, I think that it's totally at the pleasure of the board. I would suggest that this is a good recruitment and retention tool for us, and I can't imagine or envision the compensation and benefit review suggesting that this was not an important piece. But we're happy to go whichever way the board directs, whether temporary and included, or permanent and included as part of the review, or not. But I think this is, well, this is a pretty common benefit today, both in public and non-public sector organizations. So I don't suspect we're going to learn anything surprising as part of the compensation review. But again, happy to go wherever the board directs.
Thank you.
Just checking to see if there's other comments. So we had a beginning of a resolution from Director Hopful.
Yes, I'll make the resolution that we grant the $1,000 per employee moving forward each year, but with the exception of handing in receipts. I don't think that we should be handing in receipts. It takes staff's time. And because it's health and wellness, I feel that privacy and confidentiality towards whatever they're spending it on should be noted.
So.
Kristen first.
No, I just said what the resolution is. Could you?
I was just wondering if we could
Streamline that.
well, not stream, but look at whether we can streamline the policy. The policy, the administrative, it's a CAO policy. So just kind of that direction to streamline as possible.
Absolutely.
So what is, I'll second.
So that is increasing the benefit from 500 to 1,000 on an ongoing basis with the streamlining as possible.
Yes.
Sounds good.
And then CAO Dalton can minister that as
Absolutely.
sees best fit. Seconded by Director Rainbow. Comments, questions? Anyone opposed to that? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, and we'll proceed.
All right. So the next little table here shows the major expenses for projects in 2023. This doesn't include just the salaries, which would also cover a lot of project costs, but this is specific just expense lines in the general government budget. So I do have some funds set aside for the community to community forum in case this happens in 2023. There's also the grant writing support from NDIT project ongoing, as well as the economic development capacity building project ongoing. I say ongoing, but we apply every year. So I've kept those in the 2023 budget. And also there's the website upgrade project, which is $60,000, which within the 2023 budget. There is also new government operations software, which is kind of called performance management software, and it's $75,000 estimated in the budget. There's also a potential grant for asset management work, and it's integrated with sustainability. So it's actually an Area D integrated sustainability service delivery plan potential. That's in the budget for $400,000. And there is confirmed funds from UBCM for asset management strategy, governance structure, and updated asset management policy of 35,000 in the budget for 2023.
I'll stop you there for a moment. We have a question, and now that fire truck with the Ferrari engine. Victor Rainbow.
Yes, Suzanne, could you just speak a little bit more about that integrated sustainable service delivery plan?
Yeah, so it was a grant application that we sent in to look at basically asset management as well as climate change kind of combined into a sustainability lens for Area D due to the increasing population and service requirements. So to make sure that we can deliver the services needed to that area in a sustainable manner, it was brought to the board just for a resolution in terms of being approved for applying. And so we've applied, but we haven't received confirmation that we've received this grant yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that was it for general government budget. Before I go to land planning, is there anything else that anybody wants to discuss about the general government budget? Okay, so land planning and zoning budget is pretty similar to what you saw last month. I did increase certain items. We just put a little bit more legal bylaw enforcement into the budget. We kept the natural hazard policy creation project in the budget, which is basically carrying forward from 2022. There are obviously some surplus carry forward funds from 2022 as well. And the operational reserve balance is just meeting the minimum requirements. And any questions on the land planning and zoning budget?
Not seeing any.
All right. So the regional solid waste management budget, I did transfer $70,000 from the operational reserve to reduce the requisition requirement. We still have 63,804 in the reserve, which is close to the minimum required based on our reserve guidelines. In the cost center, we have the zero waste educator, which is basically budgeted each year. The zero waste ambassador contract, which is new starting last year, has been budgeted again in 2023. There's diversion projects, illegal dumping strategy, and the new projects basically were for the solid waste emergency management plan, which is $50,000. And I guess that was the only, oh, and there's also the same wild safe coordinator being budgeted for 2023. Are there any questions on the regional solid waste management budget?
Suzanne, can you just remind me, the wild safe DC guy, do we pay that whole salary, or is that do we get a grant for some of that?
I don't know the specifics behind that program, unfortunately.
50% is funded by wild safe BC.
I think it is, but I just wasn't assuming about it 20. I wasn't sure about that. Whether that was matched by somebody else or.
Yeah, we've budgeted the same amount last year, $20,000. So I believe that is the required amount from
us. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know what the other, like if Wild Safe BC also provides an amount to their workers.
It's a pretty valued program in the electoral areas for sure.
So there's a hand from Councillor
Oh,
Anderson.
we have a question
Sorry,
from Councillor Anderson. Thanks.
You're muted, Councillor Anderson.
Wonder if I could ask CEO Dalton if there is a schedule for a review of the Regional Solid Waste Management Plan, which is 2016. It was concluded. Is there an idea of looking ahead to a review of that plan?
Yes.
Thanks, Director Anderson. And my understanding is that works to start this year. I'm not sure if Ms. Belsham is here or can add anything to that, or Suzanne, if you have anything further to add to that.
Yeah, so I'm sorry if I missed this in my notes, but yes, we added 27,500 to start the review and update of the solid waste management plan. And this will be going forward for a couple of years. They're going to work on this update.
Thank you. That answers my question, that was the amount tagged for that process, or the initial phases of that process. Thank you.
And Director Herford?
Thank you. I'm just curious about the transfer of the reserve funds and just how that fits in here, and sort of maybe the policy that guides that, or the thought process that guides that, so I can understand just so I can better understand that piece.
Yeah, so at the beginning of 2022, we had 133,000 available in the operational surplus reserve for solid waste management. And this can be used for any operational needs. So it's basically put aside every year if there's a surplus in that specific year. And it can be pulled from to offset requisition, to offset project costs. It's very open and available. So I pulled some to offset the increase to the requisition. And in the 5-year view, I'm just going to go to the next 5-year. You'll see, because of the increase in 2024, we could pull some more in 2024 as well. So I've been using it to offset the requisition increases needed.
Doing good to proceed?
All right. So the Utilities and Environmental Services Department budget, this is a clearing budget. Basically, all of their costs are charged out to the services they worked on throughout the year. And this is actually through our financial software. So when they place hours into their timesheet, those hours get charged out based on their charge out rates to those services that they entered into their timesheets. The salaries does include the new facilities manager position, which has kind of been rejigged to also have a technologist position. So it's been rejigged to be a technologist position. So the regional transit planning infrastructure budget, it does include that $50,000 carry forward, which is coming from the surplus reserve to move transit forward. There was also a board resolution that this potentially could be used for the Area C transit if needed, but it's not needed for 2022. So it's all available for 2023 for regional transit and infrastructure planning. So the RGS we kind of touched on already. There's some monitoring included, but potentially this will just be transferred, moved to 2024 if it's not needed. I like to budget it just in case there's any amendments that come up, that there has to have some availability for work to be done on this budget. And Sea to Sky Trail. So this is the first time the board is reviewing this budget. There is a potential to increase this maximum requisition to 187,500, but potentially this won't be available till 2024 just due to the timing of trying to get all the consents from the municipal councils. The budget is flat currently to 2022 for requisition. We've increased some legal costs for basically getting the statutory right of ways completed. There is some increased maintenance requirements as well in this budget. And there's some new projects in this budget. So there's the Friendship Trail through Lillooet Reserve Lands. There's a federal active transportation fund grant for that. There's the Sea to Sky Trail, Gordon's Garden to Nairn, which is donor funded and grant funded. There is potential grants added for this project. And the Cheakamus Canyon Highway Trail, there's a partial offset with a Trans-Canada Trail grant. And there's also the Sea to Sky Trail Cheakamus Highway portion from another grant of $120,000. And there's also increased time allocation for 2023 due to all these projects in this budget. And I'll take any questions. I'm just going to quickly go to this budget since it's the first time we viewed it. So basically, these are all the grants up above and including the donor contribution here. And the expenses are in the fixed assets here. There's also the service site maintenance increases would be up into the operating expenses. And I'll take any questions from the board.
Strictly out of curiosity, because I'm interested in this project. Are those completed at the end of 2023? Imagine it'd be a multi-year project, but I don't know.
Yes, yeah, most likely these will continue for carrying forward till the project is completed. I'm not sure of the actual timeline for each of these projects, but if just putting all the expenses available in case they are completed in 1 year.
And the contribution amount from the donor, that doesn't have any time limits on it. We use it as we need to use it.
I'm not sure the specifics of that.
So my money, we have to spend it or it goes away. It goes away. I think Director Dalton.
CAO Dalton.
Yeah, sorry, could you please repeat the question? Was it the donor funding?
The donor funding is a gift and we use it until the project is completed, or does it go away if timelines aren't met?
I would, so it's tied to specific, it's tied to a specific project for a specific purpose. I wouldn't hazard a guess what might happen if things didn't progress on a timeline per se, but it's donated for a specific section of trail to be completed.
Okay. Thanks.
Are there other questions? Yes, Director Berger.
I was just curious of maintenance, like where, and maybe I need a familiarization with that the overall project, as much as I've spent lots of time on the trail itself. Some maintenance a consideration, or where does that live?
Yeah, so there's operating expenses for maintenance where we contract Squamish Trail Society to do some repairs here, and that is on the Cheakamus Canyon Trail portion. There's also some Friendship Trail maintenance and $9,000 for trail maintenance on Derailicon and Wedge Woods.
Okay.
And there's also, yeah, that's it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And is that generally been reoccurring? I don't see anything else in those. It just, or is it a project by project or issue by issue sort of basis?
Yeah, it wasn't budgeted in 2022 to the same level as it is in 2023. And I'm sorry, there's also this service site maintenance line here, and that's for snow clearing and trail maintenance as well. So that was budgeted continuously throughout the budgets the budget cycles, but these amounts are new to the budget. Specific trails that need some work that the trail coordinator has basically pointed out and asked for funding.
Okay, thank you.
And Director Rainbow and then Director Demare.
Now, my question, Suzanne, was around the maintenance, and we've got various amounts allocated to maintenance. My question was who is deciding what needs to be maintained and where money should be spent?
So the trails coordinator is basically overseeing this project. And there has been some damage done to high waters, for example, in certain areas that need to be fixed. And she's the one that decides what should be focused on in each year.
If I want some work done on a trail in Area D, I go to staff and
Yes.
ask for that.
I see Director Anderson to follow Sal Demare and then Chris.
Just curious, is there a program where nonprofit societies can volunteer to do trail maintenance on these trails? Or is it all specifically contracted out?
I'm not aware, but I'm pretty sure it's contracted out. I don't know the specifics of the contracts, though.
Yeah, thank you.
Director Anderson.
Thank you. The discussion and the information presented regarding Sea to Sky Trails, it concerns largely physical works, as I understand it, and not things like interpretive programming, signage, and other kinds of interpretive programming. I know through working with the late Gord McKeever that was very dear to his heart, and I will just make the observation that it's something to consider, perhaps in the context of a heritage review, which is another item that's come up in our packages for these meetings for future consideration. But this could be quite important for the SLRD and its involvement with the Sea to Sky Trails. It is also a matter that the Pemberton Museum has devoted substantial attention to, the history of that trail. And is also, of course, relevant to First Nations heritage and cultural institutions and programs. It is an ancient trade and travel corridor. So I'll just highlight that it is an aspect of the Sea to Sky Trails project, always was intended to be, is interpretation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Anderson. Director Pettingill.
Yeah, I'm just realizing maybe this is a question to just hold on to for the Governance Excellence Committee or something, but I'm sort of thinking in terms of what I would anticipate a board to do in terms of would have a policy that at a high level prioritizes trails, and then staff would decide how to work within that, as opposed to us sort of directing each meeting and do this and that on each trail. But do we have such a policy, or is that, where we would go with the Governance Committee? Possibly.
CAO Dalton or Mr. France? CAO Dalton, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the same thought based on this discussion had popped into my mind, and it's a question of the sort of the nature of the operational program, how maintenance priorities are determined on an annual basis, how that money is allocated, what's operational and routine work for staff, and when would the board need to be consulted and how in directing that work. And I think that also links to how our budget is managed and communicated to the board annually. So my suggestion would be that I know Director LaFrance has some thoughts and ideas about how to evolve the budget process going forward, but I would suggest that be incorporated into the governance review work, and something that we look at over time.
Okay, that makes sense. Jack?
Until that time, I think it's important that maintenance priorities be decided by staff rather than me phoning and asking for Whistler work to be done and Chris phoning and asking for Squamish work to be done. This is work that is determined based on requirement to the service area, not the desires of an individual director. So I'm eager for that conversation to take place at the governance excellence, but between now and then, I hope that we can agree that that's work done by staff.
And further to that we have, I'm happy to see maintenance allocated and maintenance funds allocated and how they're distributed and applied to Director Crump's point is absolutely with staff. So I think it's I see my role to make sure that we're contemplating a measure of maintenance, and that if there's a line of zeros in maintenance on this piece of work that we've funded, for years and years, and that should be alarm bells around this table and the rest. And I think this is appropriate at this point, and staff have obviously brought forward what they felt their priorities were. So I'm happy with that, but there's acknowledged a lot more work to do to make sure that it's being done effectively, and other overlaying policies are in place, but I'm happy with where we are.
Thank you. Director Demare.
I'm just curious because I'm not very familiar with the Sea to Sky Trail. Is it part of the BC Rec Sites and Trails program, or is it tenured land that the SLRD has tenure on? And the reason I ask that, if it's part of the Rec Sites and Trails, then there's a whole reporting program that has to be done and an audit done every year and submitted to Rec Sites and Trails on the condition of the trail.
To my knowledge, this is independent of the BC Rec Sites and Trails. I don't know that we have anyone here who could be specific on that. CEO Dalton, is that a question for Director Belsham?
Yeah, that's something we could certainly take away, Chair.
Thank you.
So that is a takeaway. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in discussing these trails. Any other questions for Suzanne at the current moment? Then please proceed. Ms. LaFrance.
All right, and that basically concludes everything that I have for presenting. So I could take any final questions. So basically, these budgets will be presented to the board in the March meeting for adoption. There will be some adjustments basically for forecast figures. There might be very small adjustments for the funding resolutions that come through. And that should be all the adjustments made for that final presentation.
Thank you. I'm looking for hands, Director Hopwell. Yeah, maybe, yeah. And Mike Richmond too.
Okay, my question is, so if I was going to narrow this down to the District of Lillooet, how much would I say, what is the percentage of increase on the tax form is Lillooet gonna see?
I don't have that specific amount, but I do have the total for Lillooet as being the 35,000 estimate here. And if you bear with me, I can just pull up last year's amount and I can give you.
That would be helpful.
Yeah. Sorry, just bear with me as I open up the spreadsheet, which is quite a large spreadsheet, so it takes time.
And I do see Director Richmond, you're next on the list.
And so the 35,000, that's a total amount, including increase, everything, that's what, or?
For the regional budgets, yes. So these regional budgets are just the pocket that all constituents in the SLRD pay for. So all members are a part of. And so it doesn't include items like the Lillooet landfill that the District of Lillooet does participate in with just area A and B. So these are just the regional budgets.
Okay.
Director Richmond?
Thank you. As part of the compensation review, we're looking at CPI increases of 6.6% to wages and salaries. As part of the compensation review that's coming later this year, is the goal to establish what I've been referring to as a compensation philosophy or policy? And if so, will that include things like, a policy around how we deal with CPI increases? Will it deal with director remuneration, political director remuneration? And will it have sort of an update embedded in it to make sure that it remains current? And if those questions are premature, I can wait.
Yep, please proceed, CAO Dalton.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, that is what the precisely what we intend that compensation and benefit review to put in front of the board or help the board develop a compensation philosophy. And as part of that work, we will, and so yes, we will include political directors in that. And to your point about CPI, we will include in that work a look at how jurisdictions account for annual cost of living increases in both union and non-union environments, because it is, there's some work required to help to enable understanding of what those different approaches look like and what the benefits of a union approach versus non-union looks like in terms of annual CPI increases. So short answer, yes, but I think that it's key that what we really want to help the board do is establish a philosophy as opposed to specific decisions related to compensation and benefit, if that makes sense.
Thanks. It does make sense, and that's kind of what, I won't say what I was worried about, but I'm hopeful that what we're creating is a live document or something that will get updated and that will help inform board, year over year, board over board, as opposed to something that we have to start and stop every number of years and do a full compensation review. I hope it's developed in such a way that has measurables that gets inputted sort of thing over the course of, or updated over the course of time, so that it's a live document. It sounds like that's the direction we're going. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you
Okay,
both.
and for Director Hopful, the 2022 regional budget amount for District of Lillooet was 36,314 estimate. So it's very close to the 2023 with $1,000 and 1,200 in savings.
Okay, and again, that's not including the landfill, the library, the invasive species, right?
It does include the invasive species, yep,
it
but
does?
not the
Okay.
landfill and not the library like you mentioned, yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I don't see hands. Are there other questions for Director LaFrance? I'd like to thank you and.
Do we receipt of the,
Yes,
we receipt of the report?
Yes, thank you. Moved by Director Hooper to receive this report, seconded by Director Demare. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. See ya.
Bye, Suzanne. Item 5, Director's Report, the Chair's verbal report. I just would comment that Jen Ford is busy with UBCM meetings and duties, and she'll be away in Cambodia from March 2nd to 13th.
Is that a holiday?
It's related to the UBCM work.
Oh, is it really?
Yes.
Oh,
And
I volunteered to do that for her.
think of it.
It's UBCM has a relationship with the
Cambodia.
Cambodian Association of Local Governments, and it's like women in government, and the president goes over every year, or had until COVID, and then so she's the first one to go since COVID. Which is pretty
Oh, that's great.
And I think she's looking forward to it.
Oh,
Kind of
yeah.
exciting and interesting. It's like a sister organization. Yeah. Do we have a decision on late business? We have nothing.
Would you like to? Get a motion?
Should we see my report, please?
Oh,
Thank you, Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Herford. No one.
I just like to comment, I thought it was a really good report.
Thank you.
You, yeah.
And decision on late business, we don't have any. So we will adjourn this. A motion to adjourn from Director Rainbow, seconded by Director Herford. No one is opposed. Do we have follow-up work from yesterday? We should agree. A little bit.
So we are now going back into the open board meeting. We have one recommendation from the committee of the whole, which is the health and wellness benefit increase. So a motion to consider that, please.
We don't need a motion to go back into the board meeting because we recessed from that one. Okay,
Yeah.
so then we're looking for a motion. Or no, we are reporting. On,
Supervisory report.
Oh, a motion to accept the committee of the whole's recommendation on the health and wellness.
Director Rainbow, Director Herford first. Thank you for the resolution. Director Hopper, no one is opposed to that. Well, we don't have to, we just have to report on.
No, we
are voting on it.
There are voting.
So there's no opposition, so that motion is carried.
And then motion to go into closed, please.
So moved by Director Herford, seconded by Hopper. Closed, we are back into closed.
Let's short recess.